They want to destroy it. No, Halifax, not the cooking kind. Okay. March 30th, 1940. The nations of Europe, in 1940, are nations that run on oil. And if you want to really weaken your enemy without a fight, one way to do that is to knock out his oil supply. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week was really a week of political foreshadowing, as Adolf Hitler met Benito Mussolini, and Mussolini said he would join the war when the time was ripe. And France lost Edouard Daladier as prime minister, replaced by Paul Reynaud. Reynaud proposes, in a secret memorandum to the British War Cabinet, reviving the plan to act in Norwegian waters, claiming the German retaliation will give the French and British a reason for taking the Swedish iron ore fields that supplied Germany. On the 28th, Reynaud flies to London for a meeting of the Allied Supreme War Council. There, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain proposes they could do something to impress neutrals by floating mines in the Rhine River. Okay, Max Hastings says this was First Lord of the Admiralty Winston Churchill's idea, but anyhow, Chamberlain supports it. And he also proposes cutting off the iron shipping route to Germany by just blocking it with a minefield. German ships would then have to hit the open sea, where they would be seized by the Royal Navy. Chamberlain also proposes, as had Reynaud, an attack on the Soviet Caucasian oil fields. All of these proposals are agreed on. Recon over the oil city Baku will begin the 30th. Mines dropped in the Rhine April 4th. Mine-laying ships will be sent to Norwegian territorial waters the 5th. And they also decide that if Germany does invade Belgium, French and British forces will go through Belgium all the way to the German border without being invited to do so by Belgium. Britain and France also formally agreed that neither will seek a separate peace with Germany. Reynaud's own ministers, however, nixed the idea of mining the Rhine, fearing retaliation. But the British do begin the reconnaissance over Baku. This is part of Operation Pike, their strategic bombing plan to sabotage the Soviet oil supply, which would also sabotage the German oil supply, because that's where Germany is getting its oil. This has been talked about off and on for months, but has lately been gaining momentum. Last month, Allied Commander Maurice Gamelin had written, "Dependence on oil supplies from the Caucasus is the fundamental weakness of the Russian economy. Interruption of oil supplies on any large scale could even result in the collapse of all the military, industrial, and agricultural systems of Russia." Now, if you're thinking, wait, the Allies aren't at war with the Soviet Union, well, yeah, but the Nazi-Soviet pact has most of those in charge seeing the USSR as an ally of Germany anyhow. Crippling both Soviet and German armies and economies at one and the same time looks like a good idea. So now on the 30th, a modified and camouflaged Lockheed Super Electra takes off from Iraq, heads over the Caspian Sea coast, and then north towards Baku. It spends an hour in Soviet airspace taking photographs before returning to base. As for military plans at the opposite end of Europe, I talked last week about France's Maginot Defense Line and the makeup of the British armed forces that are currently in France. I'm going to talk a bit now about the French and the Germans. John Keegan has this to say: "The French army was a piecemeal collection of divisions and units, good, indifferent, and plain bad. The good ones are the 10 infantry divisions of trained conscripts. These are at full strength even during peacetime. Colonial divisions and the Armée d'Afrique also number among the good. Reserves, who are less good, are category A and B, A being the ones mobilized from younger men, and B from men over 32. The B ones are not soldier material for the most part, and there are descriptions in several sources of them as shabby and even insubordinate. The men of the French motorized divisions are good men, but the system is somewhat incoherent. There are 5 light cavalry divisions, which have both horse units and armored car units. 3 light mechanized divisions have armored cars and tanks. 4 armored divisions of just tanks, and 10 motorized infantry divisions. Thing is, these divisions are distributed throughout the armies, so there's no wall of armor, or even a big chunk of it, like that of Wunstedt's German Army Group A, which I talked about a few weeks ago, that is the planned spearhead of Germany's coming Western attack. Keegan notes that the only French trained and equipped for a specifically allotted function are the fortress divisions on the Maginot Line, including Madagascan and Indo-Chinese machine gunners. But those troops are locked into their positions and can't be effectively deployed elsewhere. The German army, however, is homogeneous. They have armored units, motorized units, and infantry units, and that's it. Men are still being moved to the Western Front. But a month or so from now, there will be 10 armored divisions, 6 motorized divisions, and 118 infantry divisions there, 134 total, as opposed to the coming French total of all branches and reserves of 116. And the German ones do not differ greatly in quality, well, not since the experience of the Polish invasion, whether they had been active pre-war or not, other than a few elite mountain divisions. The German command structure is also pretty straightforward. Hitler and OKW, his supreme command, set up headquarters near the general staff and worked directly with them, and left them to deal with operations. The Luftwaffe coordinate air operations with the army through Army Command, and that's it. As for the Allies, General Gamelin is supreme commander of operations, but his authority goes down through General Doumerc, the commander of land forces, and General Georges, the commander of the Northeast. That command includes 3 French army groups and the British Expeditionary Force. Lord Gort is the commander of the BEF, and though operationally he answers to Georges, politically he answers to the British cabinet. Since Gamelin does the same to the French cabinet, by this time he is dealing with Gort directly instead of through Georges. Gort mostly looks to London for orders. Gamelin's headquarters is near Paris. Doumerc and Georges in 2 different parts of northern France. Gort's and both the British and French air forces are also separate. There really is no centralization of command. And a major difference is how the men look at the war. It is very much a, why do we have to do this again for the British? The French fought the First World War on their own territory and still very much bear the scars of it, and also see this as a pointless repetition. But a big reason for that, from the generals down to the privates, they all think that this war, if the Germans attack, will be a long, drawn-out war of attrition in the trenches, and nobody really has the stomach for that. The Germans, though, have seen a different style of war in Poland, and though there are skeptics, many believe that it can work just as well in the West. But if the Germans will try new tactics, the Allies might one day try a new weapon. The Frisch-Peierls Memorandum is the first such document that deals with the practical, technical details of a nuclear weapon. German physicists Otto Frisch and Rudolf Peierls are working at the University of Birmingham, and the memorandum, which comes out this month, not only has the first calculations about the critical mass of fissile material needed for an atomic bomb, but theorizes that the amount, perhaps a small sphere of uranium-235, could be small enough to fit into a bomb that could be dropped by air, and that a 5-kilo bomb could equal the force of thousands of tons of dynamite. They do note that the radioactive fallout from such a device might well make it morally unacceptable to the British public. And far to the east this week sees a new government. Well, sort of. On the 30th, Wang Jingwei's government is established at Nanjing. Its newspaper, which translates as China Daily, praises Chairman Wang, but does not call this government a new regime, but the restoration of the true Chinese Nationalist Party. It's also, as Rana Mitr writes, loaded with propaganda cartoons like ones of Wang as a superhuman giant light radiating towards children who represent the Chinese people. Zhao Fohai, who had chosen ministers for the new government, is also the man behind its actual muscle. See, Wang doesn't have much military support, and that makes him lesser in Japanese eyes. It also puts him in danger of assassination as he has loads of enemies in China. Well, Zhao hadn't had much choice but to recruit muscle from 2 thugs who ran an enforcement squad, which further hurt Wang's prestige, even if it did make his life safer. Zhao still also hopes for reconciliation with Chiang Kai-shek and the Nationalist Army, even while setting up the new government with Wang. But still, at the ceremony of the 30th, he states, "My idea has come to reality. This is the happiest thing that has happened in my life. The national government has returned to the capital, and the whole thing was started up by me." Wang is not quite as full of hubris. One witness even says he was in tears. Mitr writes, "His vision of an equal collaboration with the Japanese now looked hollow." We've talked about this a couple months ago, and as I've said, Japan does not send an ambassador, which would imply official recognition. And the week ends with a variety of ideas floated by the Allied War Council, recon over Baku, and the first practical ideas for building a monster weapon. Oh, and on the 29th, Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov speaks to the Supreme Soviet about an unsettled dispute, Romanian Bessarabia, which would be the last piece of military control of the territories agreed as Soviet in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Germany and the USSR. You can already maybe see how that might go considering what the USSR has been up to the past 6 months, but hey, if the Allies can sabotage or destroy their oil supply, that's just gonna remain words. Wars for oil, that's what it comes down to. The Allies have yet to really fight the Germans in the field. It's already a war for oil. Our TimeGhost Army member of the week is Dmitry Stillerman. It's Dmitry's contribution that keeps our troops putting out these episodes. If you haven't already, join the TimeGhost Army on Patreon or at timeghost.tv. The war effort needs you. If you want to know more about why the Germans can't get their oil in the Middle East, click right here for our episode about that on Between Two Wars. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.